Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the school committee meeting for Greenfield Public Schools. Today is Wednesday, March 4th, 2020. We are in the GCTV Studios at 393 Main Street in Greenfield. This is being recorded and broadcast live by GCTV. Is anyone else recording? Melina from the recorder, thank you. Anyone else recording? I do want to make a note, this is not a normal location for our meetings. We were unable to find another appropriate location for the evening, and the timeline for the budget for fiscal year 21 required that we meet by today. So we are forced into this location, and we will make the best of it for the evening. I'll do a roll call at this time. We do have one member attending by phone. Member Johnson is on the phone, and we will do a roll call, and then all votes will also be a roll call vote this evening. Member Ekstrom, would you please do the roll call?
Member Hollins.
Here.
Member Karen.
Here.
Member Wiedegartner.
Here.
Member Proietti.
Here.
Member Wall.
Here.
And myself. Member Johnson.
Here.
Are you in a room by yourself, sir?
I am.
Okay, just need to confirm that, everyone. That's why I was asking.
He needs to state the reason for participating remotely.
And Member Johnson, can you please tell us the reason for participating remotely this evening?
Yes, I needed to work in Boston.
Thank you. So we will now open it for public comment. There should be a sign-in sheet with Susan Farber over at the recording secretary's desk there. Has anyone signed in?
Yes, we're going to start with Alicia.
Alicia, come on up. Can someone else time anyone? So you'll have 3 minutes for public comment. We will time you. Please state your full name and your address, please.
My name is Alicia Pease. I live at 88 Beach Street in Greenfield, Mass. I have 2 children in the school systems here. I have a 9th grader at the high school and a 6th grader at the middle school. I'm coming today as trying to express my feelings about some policies that have been made that I'm directly seeing are affecting my children. My son has been through the whole extended day programs, through the Math and Science Academies, which we loved. And he is excelling well at the high school. He's transitioned really well. I love the program there. My issues that I'm having right now, which I've been having for a while, is that the middle school has no homework right now. And there was a policy when she was in the grade schools where they passed the policy that there's no homework for grade school either. When she transitioned into the middle school, I was very shocked to find that the administration there had no idea that there was no homework in the grade school. So it added more stress when she transitioned. And now this year, with the situation at the middle school being as what it is, I've pretty much found out that, with all the stuff with the scores and things and they're doing the extended day grant still, but I've been informed that there's no homework because of the extended day program. And these kids are struggling. Obviously, we've seen all the MCAS scores. We're trying to get things better. I was informed that the school is basically most of the students are doing the math and science curriculum. My daughter last year was she was in the math and science curriculum, and there was only 10 students in her class that were doing the math and science curriculum still. So this year, when I see this going on, I can see the difference in the education from my son and my daughter. And it's lacking. I mean, we have a whole group of middle school students that are struggling right now. And I kind of reached out when the policy was first administered in the grade schools and said, can we make it optional? I understand not everybody believes this or not, but my daughter actually, most of her class in the 4th grade was falling behind in their basic math facts and things. And they don't read, they don't do anything at home. Like, it's taking all the responsibility and putting it on the educators instead of, as a parent, me being responsible to help you educate my children. And it's really disturbing to me. I did reach out to Lynn Dole as well as Karen Patnode and had conversations with them, which they were really received it well, and just said, we got to do something. Because I have a 6th grade student right now who has no idea how to do homework. She doesn't know how to do projects. She doesn't do, I buy books, we do book reading at home, but she struggles. And she constantly struggles and is constantly trying to catch up. And it's hard to do that even, with the extended day program. And because there's the policies, the teachers and principals can't necessarily give homework because of the policies. So
Thank you. We appreciate your comments.
I'm hoping something will be done because it's ridiculous.
Please state your name and your address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. This is on already? Yep. Thank you. My name is Ginny DeSorger, and I live at 43 Silvercrest Lane. And first, I'd like to thank all of you for the numerous meetings that you had so early in the morning. I'm so happy that that was not me, and I know how many times you have met, and I'd just like to say a big thank you to you. Oh, I cannot imagine. So I don't have any comments on this whatsoever, really, because I have not read through it. Just as I'm looking for the first time, I'm sorry, but I will be reading it thoroughly. I would have a question about that. Perhaps somehow I could get the enrollment numbers, the actual enrollment numbers. Oh, that would be something that I would like. And I've also been watching all of your meetings, and it sounds like you're doing a great job with transportation. And this is just another question, how are we doing are we helping any other towns yet with the transportation? Because it did sound like that was part of the plan. So there were more questions than comments, but thank you for everything you've been doing. That's all.
Thank you, Jenny. Again, please state your full name and your address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Lucas Martin. I live at 62 Haywood Street. I'm a teacher at Greenfield High School. I'm a member of the executive board of the union, also a member of the negotiating committee for Unit A, and maybe most importantly, the parent of an incoming kindergartner next year. So I have many interests. So first, thanks for all the hard work you've put into crafting this budget. I know it's difficult and thankless work, so I'd like to express some gratitude for that we all do have, though if you think early meetings with numbers is hard, try 15-year-olds, but still I appreciate, anyway. Because those meetings have been so early, we haven't been able to attend, so mostly at this point I have questions. I've been able to review some minutes and some documents from those meetings, but not all. So I have basically 3 questions. First, with about just under $400,000 more expected coming in Chapter 70 money, I know that hasn't been completely firmed up, but that's what is expected, on top of $1.4 million more from last year. So to be clear, we're now getting about $1.8 million more in state money for schools. I'd like to know at some point what we expect from the city's contribution to the school budget. I know that hasn't been released or firmed up either. Under the former mayor in fiscal 20, the city kept nearly half of the increased state aid by reducing the city's contribution for city-side expenses. It's unclear to me if there were some new costs that justified that, but I'd like some clarity. We would like some clarity in how that is going to be rectified going forward. With a new mayor who clearly prioritizes schools and has served on this board herself. I just wonder how the school's contribution, excuse me, the city's contribution will change. Will the schools get the full benefit of the increased Chapter 70 money going into the school budget where it should be? Not only is that relevant to the $380,000 increase this year, but from last year's money, would the nearly $500,000 that was kept by the town be restored to the school's operating budget this year? So that's sort of all one big question that you may or may not be able to clarify today. Second, unless I am missing something, the budget proposed as an all-funds budget seems to include no cost of living adjustment for educators. It seems to assume a 0% increase in teachers' salaries. So I wonder if I'm missing something, if contractual increases beyond year one are somehow funded elsewhere, buried elsewhere, funded differently. I know that year one is typically from the contract stabilization fund from the town, but this would be year one and fiscal 21 would be year two. So are we actually assuming a 0% increase in teacher salaries? If so, why? If we are, I just wonder how the school committee can bargain in good faith if there is actually no money budgeted to those negotiations. Last, very quick, we have been working under an expired budget since June 30th of last year. We haven't negotiated since November for a variety of reasons, but one of those reasons is that there is no appointed representative from the school committee to negotiate with us. In January, you made all the various subcommittee appointments to the City Library Building Committee, various appointments, and so I wonder in March why we are still waiting and we are not able to. We would very much like to get back to the negotiating table. So please, if we could appoint somebody so we can continue negotiating. We are 9 months under an expired contract at the moment. Thank you. Sorry for going over the time.
Thank you, Luke.
Tara, and then Jody.
Hi, Tara.
Hi,
Please state your name, your full name, and your address for us, please, and you have 3 minutes.
my name is Tara Cloutier. My address is 255 Coleraine Road in Greenfield. I am a teacher at the high school. I am also a member of the executive board of the Teachers Union. I'm a parent of 2 9th grade girls in Greenfield High School, so I also have concerns on many levels. I would just like to reiterate some of the things that Luke said. Our concerns are really that we've been on the bargaining table for a year now. We're close to a year with no contract as teachers. Your current budget seems to allow 0% for 2 years in a row for teachers. And so we have concerns about that. And if there is bargaining, it doesn't seem to be that that's good faith bargaining without the money available, when the money has been given to us by the state. And I would just like to point out also that we are losing good people continually. The IAs, we're finally getting to the end of that negotiation, but we've lost so many, and then that really affects our students and our teachers, as well as the IAs. It makes it challenging. It's hard on the administrators. It's hard on everybody when we don't have a full staff, and we cannot service the students well if we are not adequately funded and have the personnel that we need to provide all needs for all students. So I ask that you look to the town and look to the city budget and start to demand that those funds be allocated to the schools. When the state government is allocating funds to the schools, how are they not being funded to the schools? That's what I'm questioning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Shirley.
Hey, Jody.
Hello.
Please state your full name and your address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. He's going to join me at the end. My name is Jody Falk, and I live at 52 Orchard Street with my son Matan and family. I'm here representing, I'm a representative of the district CPAC, Special Education Parent Advisory Council. Before I speak of my prepared speech, I just want to say thank you, because I know that special education is very important to this committee and has been and is reflected in the budget, and I think we just wanted to give a statement about what our goals are. So as you consider the budget and any further negotiation, it is important that we analyze the need for behaviorists. So this is a call for behaviorists and inclusion specialists. We currently have 2 BCBAs, one at the high school and the other split between the other 4 schools in the district. And we are very grateful, and we're able to get one out of last year's budget. We are aware, however, that we are severely lacking in support for these BCBAs. In a minute. Right now, he's really excited to say his line. Right now, according to our understanding, the middle school has a full-time behaviorist, Four Corners and AEL share one, and Federal Street Therapeutic Program has one and soon to be an RBT, but they do not serve the building wide. Newton has no behaviorist, and the high school has a dedicated BCBA. More behaviorists are needed to keep students in our classrooms, prevent behavior-based incidents from occurring, and to support our BCBAs and our teachers. Ideally, each building would have a BCBA, or at least one at every level, but we recognize the cost of that. We also believe that all paras in substantially separate programs should also be RBTs. Lastly, we need inclusion specialists in our district. Our curricula are usually written for the average neurotypical student and then supplemented and accommodated to different levels. Unfortunately for special ed students, their needs reach just beyond accommodation and modified language. There are so many considerations when you bring kids with high needs into a general education classroom. So I want to just stop for a second and say that I could also read several stories that people sent me to read, and just to say that inclusion is a very person-by-person thing and process, but when inclusion really works and is meaningful, it's the difference between a kid who's there to learn and happy and behaving well versus a kid who's biting and any of the other behaviors that were actually reported in the recorder. But in any case, the idea is that inclusion done with understanding and insight really makes a difference for our children, for not just the child with special needs, but the rest of the classroom as well. It's really about how do we work together as a community with everybody's needs. So I'm going to let my son say the last line. Ready? Go for it.
Thank you for our time.
Your time, Liz. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for our time.
Please
I got
state
it all
your
figured out.
full name, your address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
My name is Shirley Gilfeather. I live at 350 Plain Road in Greenfield. I find it difficult to spend just 3 minutes on a budget that is asking for an 11.9% increase, but I'll do the best I can. I have provided you with some of my thoughts in writing. I want to reiterate what some of the previous speakers have said with regard to the fact that a budget was prepared without any consideration for negotiations that are going on right now and having anything built into salaries. I think it's that kind of budget preparation that led to a 36% increase for paraprofessionals this year, because it wasn't taken care of in previous years to bring them up to a standard that was reasonable. So when you don't plan ahead for these things, they catch up with you. And so I'm concerned that we have an 11.9% increase facing us, and we haven't even built in the most important part of our budget that I think is the direct contact with students, which is teachers and teacher salaries. We are losing teachers to surrounding districts because they pay more. We did lose a lot of instructional aides during the period of time that their contract was looking for finalization, so I am concerned about that. I am an educator of 42 years, retired. I had 15 years in school and district administration, where I worked a lot with budgets. I've spent the last 2 days going through this budget, including the budget subcommittee materials as well as the online proposed budget that was provided. I've made a number of comments here, and I would say at first glance, and so I tell you that all of this is at first glance without talking to any direct department personnel, but just from years of experience of looking at budgets and knowing that we have to realize the financial times that we're in. And this community cannot withstand an 11.9% increase in a school budget, on top of the taxations we have for other things here. So we have to look at this budget, and we have to look at it and say, are there things in this budget that could be cut and still provide good direct services to students? And my answer to that was certainly yes. There is a section at the tail end on page 2 here where I went through very quickly and took a look at what I consider some of the top-heavy expenses in this district. The fact that we have 2 assistant special education administrators in addition to a regular administrator and a district-wide team leader is excessive. Exclamation point, exclamation point. There's savings there. To have 2 associate principals, and I'm not talking about people, I'm talking about positions, but to have 2 associate principals at a middle school and a high school with the sizes that we have is excessive. To have, 4 psychologists in this district is excessive, okay? If you take a look at a comparable district, East Hampton would be one of those. It has a somewhat similar size. It has a greater special ed population than we do here in Greenfield. And if you do a comparison here, you will see that the excesses that I've noted here are true and true in form. Just the few changes that I made here came to a savings of $1,217,255. Okay? Now, I'm not saying that everything I listed here could possibly be cut, but it certainly should be considered. And I'm saying that I think that perhaps I would send, as people would say, you back to the drawing board to take a look at this budget and see if there aren't indeed things in here where I see certain places that there was a 100% increase or a 50% increase. Aren't there things here that could be taken care of? I will note that there was one place where there was a solution in transportation that brought the transportation costs down because you bought some vans and you got some drivers. Congratulations, great job. That's solving a long-term problem in a very excellent manner.
Shirley, I'm going to have to cut you off.
Okay, so I'm just hoping that you will read the rest of this. And again, we're here for kids. Let's remember that, please. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? I thank you to all who participated in that. We appreciate your comments. We're going to move on and actually open the public hearing. The time is, I can't tell, 6:28 p.m. and we will open the public hearing. Do I need a motion for that? No, we'll just open it up. And I want to start by saying a few things related to the process up until now, and then we will have the superintendent give her presentation. That's a normal part of the process for the public hearing. And we'll see how that goes, and if we feel like we need to, we can also make a motion to allow for additional public comment at the end. This process is not what any district would want to have, particularly for a starting point for the budget process. We did not have school committee participation in crafting a fiscal year 21 budget until the new school committee members were sworn in January, and until after we had our first organizational meeting and our first school committee meeting in January of this year. I believe the date was January 8th, but I no longer remember all of those dates off the top of my head. And we began meeting, we created a budget subcommittee. We began meeting in that budget subcommittee, which is myself, Member Ekstrom as the chair of that committee, and Member Wall is our third committee member. We met regularly, actually twice a week for most of the time leading up until we had to publish the budget in the paper, which was on February 22nd. So we had to have everything ready to go to the recorder for February 20th. We met twice a week at 8:15 a.m. at the middle school. We heard from as many of the department heads that we could schedule. I believe it was most of them, if not all of them. And we talked a great deal about fiscal year 20, about fiscal year 21, and about the years that will come beyond this. We also made a commitment to do two things that come to mind that are critical for the public to understand. The first is we made a strong commitment from the time we were sworn in to communicate directly and openly and regularly with the city side. And I believe that not only is that already reaping benefits that you may not see in this budget and you may not see yet in the public, but it is something that is vastly different than what has happened for at least the past 10 years in Greenfield. And that cannot go unnoticed. And we are less than 2 months into that process, and that means we have not yet seen how much more productive and how much more we can advocate for the taxpayers of Greenfield with that process. And the second thing that we chose to do differently that I want to point out is we chose to look at the budget from a totally different perspective. We did not look to necessarily say we are going to do level services or level funding, but we looked at what we needed as a school district. And we chose to make the budget that we put forward for today a starting point for discussions with the city and for discussions amongst ourselves on how our budget should look. And I have said over and over again that we cannot continue to craft budgets for the school district in the way that they have been crafted in previous years. We have to work with the city to identify a number of different places where we can make structural changes in how the school district operates. And I can tell you with full confidence and full certainty and that I am enjoying this process because I have had the support and the good faith of both the superintendent and the mayor in moving this forward. And I feel really good about where we're at right now. What I don't feel great about is that we have a lot of hard decisions ahead of us. And you will know that, you have to know that we will be making some very, very tough choices as we move forward. There are certain pieces of the budget that we cannot change how much they cost. And there are certain pieces of the budget that also we can't change what they cost, but we can see that if we make changes over the next 2 or 3 years, we can vastly improve how we spend money and how we're able to bring costs under control and provide different opportunities for our students and provide a different and improved environment for all of the community that interacts with the schools. We have inherited a great deal of really problematic ways of managing money, and we can only go up from here. We need your support. We need your feedback. We appreciate all of it. And it will not necessarily be easy or agreed with by all of us, but the goal is to keep moving forward from here and show the public over a period of years that the city and the schools are on the same page and working together to provide a district and provide a living environment in the city of Greenfield that benefits our children in a vast number of ways that it does right now. And I feel very strongly about all of that. And I do, as I said, welcome your feedback as we move forward. I hope you will take this under advisement as you also listen to the presentation from Superintendent Harper. And with that, I'll turn that over to her. Please, Member Ekstrom.
I do want to talk a little bit about looking at things in percentages. As we are discussing the Unit C, the instructional assistance contract, I keep hearing 33% of an increase and how huge that is. Well, if you're making $11.27 an hour, 2% or 3% isn't enough. We're interested in going to that percentage because that's what a person deserves to make on the short end. And so this year when we were talking about the budget, and I was pleasantly surprised to have Amy agree with me when I said the community needs to know the actual costs of the actual cost of educating students, excuse me, in our community. And as we're looking at this budget, some of that is reflected. This actually doesn't include as many, I'll say things, but doesn't include what our principals have asked for necessarily. Because Georgiana sort of talked me off the ledge when I said, no, everyone needs to know how much it costs. It's 11% or whatever it is, great. That's because we haven't been budgeting properly. We've been budgeting every year based off what we received the year previously. But the year previously, we didn't receive the amount that we had hoped for to begin with. So we're never at a spot where we're actually talking about what it is and what we need to educate our students. So part of the reasoning behind this is because I think we all need to know. Now, whether the city is able to meet us there, I have no idea. But it isn't something that we should put our head in the sand and not talk about. And so that's sort of where that discussion started. And the mayor was at our meetings and we spoke very openly and said, no, the odds are we're not going to get this, but everyone needs to know what it costs. And it's okay to say the number out loud. No one's gonna shrivel up and die from hearing it. And so that's sort of where it came from. And Amy spoke much more eloquently than I did. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The other members will have an opportunity to speak once the superintendent gives her presentation.
So thank you to the committee. Thank you to the members of the public, to people that spoke this evening, to people that are watching at home. Thank you to the educators in our district. Thank you to the families that are the backbone of our district. Thank you to the families that choose Greenfield, that stay here, and thank you to our students, because without you, we wouldn't have a purpose, and we are here to serve our students. So I'll talk about the presentation of the draft budget. For those of you in the audience, there is a presentation that we're looking at. It's on the screen. We will post this later on our website as well. All of the other handouts besides the televised presentation are already on our website. So if you're watching from home and you'd like to follow along, you can go to gpsk12.org, click on the school committee tab on the right-hand side, and then scroll down to our school committee meetings where we post all of our materials, but it's particularly important if you'd like to try to understand the budgeting that goes into this. You can also find on our website all of the minutes, all of the recordings from the in-depth budget and finance work that's been done. So we start, if somebody's going to advance through this, yes or no? Maybe we need a clicker? Does anybody want to be a clicker? I just realized.
I'll do it.
Do you want to do it?
I'll do it. Susan, you have to take
You have to.
I'll do it.
She'd rather click than take.
Yeah.
So we start.
Can't move the chair, it won't slide.
Thank you. We start with an image. This is taken in our Newton School Gymnasium. We start with an image of some of the faces that make up the Greenfield Public Schools. Because you heard in public comment that this is about our students, and this budget is designed with our students in mind. I will say at the outset that this is a different budget process than years past. This budget does not say the superintendent's budget all over it. I was very clear throughout the budget process that I did not think that this community could sustain an 11% or greater increase. The mayor is clear that that's the case also. Having said that, I do think that this community has shown two things. One, we're certainly able to make cuts, and we have. Two, people care about our schools and rally behind them. And I think what we're going to do tonight is open a conversation, as the chair said, and we will have many more meetings as we come to a final decision about what the budget looks like. And so if you leave with any clear understanding tonight, I want it to be that we need you to stay engaged in the budget process from now through the end. It's not a one-shot hearing. You're going to hear us talk about what is and isn't in the budget, but it may not look like this by the end. So if you could please walk away tonight knowing that it is a process and we need you to stay involved. That will do justice to the kids that we're trying to serve by creating this budget. All right, so I would like to thank the Budget and Finance Subcommittee. You have an image here of meeting with a number of principals with our Budget and Finance Subcommittee, and that process really respected the needs at the schools and started by saying, what do you have, what do you need, what have you already cut? It is a myth that we start with what we had and we just add on from there willy-nilly. Our principals tell you they are making do every day, and I will not respond to individual comments, but I will tell you without a doubt, report after report says we are understaffed, we are not overstaffed. There's not anybody in this district that thinks we have enough psychologists or behavioral support, and everybody in our schools does a heck of a job. The next is the timeline. This is just was touched on by the chair. The administrators did an awful lot of work before the school committee changed over, and then the school committee has had a real burst of activity, so I want to thank you for your focused work to get us from January to February and have a budget to be sitting here having a conversation about at all. So thank you so much. Let's talk about our students. One of the reasons that costs go up is because we continue to have students arrive in our schools that need services, teachers, textbooks, curriculum. Greenfield has students continuing to choose Greenfield, to remain in Greenfield. Unlike area districts, enrollment is steady and rising, and it has been for some time. What is changing is some of the makeup of our students so that the high needs of our population is increasing, and sometimes that means that they may need more psychologists, for example, more behavioral support, as you heard about tonight, perhaps English learners. There are services that we need to be able to provide. Mobility, for example, if a student comes in and then moves out, you might look at that number on a chart and see that there's one student in a classroom all year, but in fact that might be a student coming, another student leaving, a student coming, and it looks like a steady number over time. But a teacher meets that student, assesses them, gets them into the classroom, somebody signs them up for a bus route, somebody else enrolls them for their student lunch program, and a nurse meets with them and assesses their health needs, right? So even if it stays steady on a chart, we do a lot to meet those student needs. And in this case, our high needs students enrollment is increasing and our special education enrollment is increasing. Our current enrollment right now is 1,792 students, and you can see the breakdown by schools. These numbers are not tremendously high numbers. However, most of our schools are at capacity. And what do I mean by that? This is a good problem to have. It's a sign of a growing population, people enjoying their... Siri wants to know, sorry, what did you say? I'll tell you, Siri. Thank you for asking. So, you know, this is a good problem to have, but for many of our schools, if we had additional space, we could offer more services, and we simply don't. If we had more room, we could admit more choice in students. So sometimes people say, like, well, how many students choose your district reflects how good your district is. That's true, to a point. We're essentially capped out, so we can't take any more students, even though we have many more students that want to come to Greenfield than we can admit, because we are at the physical capacity. Our classrooms are essentially full. So here you can see a graph of that over the last 3 years. Choice in has remained steady. It's steady, it's high, but we can't really continue to grow in this area because of space available. The school committee a long time ago had an approach to this that makes a lot of sense. If you have a classroom and there's an empty seat in the classroom, you can decide whether that seat goes to a Greenfield resident, or if there's an available seat, you could let somebody choose to come from another district. But if you don't have an available seat to have them come to, you'd have to open a new classroom and hire a new teacher, and that just doesn't make sense when you're looking at the school choice model. So there's some constraints around school choice. When a student chooses Greenfield, it brings tuition dollars with them, and that adds to the program and the types of things that we can offer. But over time, we've relied more and more on this funding source, and as you can see, it's not an area that we can continue to grow, even though there's interest in the Greenfield schools, again, because of space constraints. So we have to look at it and think, how do we make sure that this is sustainable? This is a photograph taken at the YMCA of students that are participating in one of the many community connections that we have in the partnerships, and is one of the many benefits of students who participate in our schools here. This slide here shows you the Chapter 70 state aid that a few people spoke about in the public comment, asking about state aid for education. In the years leading up to the Student Opportunity Act, we saw minimal increases in Chapter 70 aid. We might have seen a $10,000 increase, a $30,000 increase. It's not nothing. You can certainly do something with $30,000. But the scale that we're talking about in recent years is quite significant in comparison. So in FY19 and in FY20, we started to see increases in that. And in FY21, we're again expecting, based on the governor's budget, just under $400,000 in additional Chapter 70 aid. But if you look between FY18 and 21, we're talking at least a $1.8 million increase in state aid to Greenfield in that period of time. So the schools, based on our population, based on our enrollment, based on those charts that you saw earlier, is generating additional state aid that's coming into the city for disbursement to eligible education expenses, which could include health insurance, direct salaries for teachers, salaries for instructional assistants, and so on. But this is showing you clearly that there is more state aid coming. This rather obtuse chart helps you understand that there's going to be additional aid coming from this state through the Student Opportunity Act, which many people are active in advocating for, and our state reps and legislators were very active about saying places like Greenfield need this funding. It's going to be phased in, so by FY27 it will be fully phased in. So because we're just at the beginning of this, we're starting to see those increases, but we've not yet seen all of them. So in the next several years, we're going to continue to see an adjustment to this broken Chapter 70 formula. And I think that this will continue to grant relief both to the city side, the rising health insurance costs, some of the things that are challenges for municipalities like retirement that is just very difficult for most municipalities to grapple with, as well as competitive salaries and attracting a workforce that can make a living wage working with our students. So phasing in the Student Opportunity Act and state aid to Greenfield is going to be an important part of getting us to sustainable revenue coming in. I do want to just say about the Student Opportunity Act, as with all things, there is no such thing as a free lunch. The plan and the funding comes with requirements. And the school committee at its next meeting will have to vote on a Student Opportunity Act plan, which essentially spells out how the district is going to use the money that's been provided by the state to address persistent achievement gaps by students in our district. What's challenging is that in an environment where we know that some of the fixed costs, some of the city side costs, some of the contractual obligations have already spoken for the increases before you've even gotten off the ground, it's hard to answer the question with a straight face, how does this go to improve services to students, besides saying attracting good people and being able to pay them to do the work they're already doing, obviously we all know that's quite important. But it may not add new services to students, which is our obligation to show to the Department of Education how are we using the funding as it's come to us. All right, this next slide provides some more detail about the FY21 operating costs. There's some high-level numbers here that help you look at where the increases for different educators are. So there is a Unit A increase. This rumor should not go farther than tonight to say we're not paying for teachers to get an increase. What is not in here is an increase for the new contract, because that would have to continue from the Contract Stabilization Fund, or we would have to find a new way working with the city to address that. So in other words, there is a plan for them to step up to the next level, but it's still under the old contract, which needs to be renegotiated. So it doesn't fully satisfy the need for it, but there is clear planning and an effort to bargain in good faith here. The Unit C increase is here, and obviously that's a significant cost. We'll get to a slide that spells that out in more detail. It's about halfway down. It's in this budget as $755,000. And then you see the staffing of new positions, which come out to about $450,000 in new positions, which is roughly the amount of money that's coming from the state in new money. So you could think of it that way. And then there are increases that are contractual increases, costs that have gotten passed on to us. We have a number of software subscriptions that have expired that our district relies upon for instructional services. For example, curriculum that is outdated that we need to replace, that is costly, but that is central to instructing our students. Those things are unavoidable, and they're presented here in the budget in the leanest way possible. For example, instead of putting in an entire curriculum textbook purchase, we've worked with the company to try to get rates where we can purchase a third at a time and spread it out over time. These are not high numbers to just sort of pad the budget and scale it back later. We've done some difficult thinking around how do we get what we really need for services to children right off the bat. Here you can see the breakdown of what is the total educational budget, and of the allowable education expenses, some of them are on the city side and some of them are on the school department side. So the orange bar is the school department side. Obviously it's the larger half of that bar. But you can also see that in 17, 18, 19, and 20, the orange bar doesn't change size a whole lot. In fact, it goes up a % or 2 a year on average. And the city side costs are on the left, the blue bar, and they've gone up quite significantly over time. Based on these figures, 28% from FY17 to FY20, or about 7% increases a year. Now, these are all part of educational spending. They're allowable education expenses, but the difference is the school committee is really only voting on the orange half. It's not a half, the orange portion. Whereas the blue portion is sort of what the city picks up, if it were, and is often only fully reported in retrospect because some of the costs are unknown at the time and so forth, and they're actual costs and they're reported in the end of year reporting. So one of the things that I will suggest strongly coming out of this process is that the school committee have full review and authority over the full budget so that they can support the city in sustainable budgeting, so that if we have additional Chapter 70 aid, we know where to prioritize putting it, and so that if there are efficiencies to be found, that we consider that the portion that grew 28% is also looked at for efficiencies, and that we can leverage the direct portion that where our students see the real benefit so that that portion can grow and the largest percentage can go directly into our classrooms to the greatest extent possible. I will also say that the Student Opportunity Act in part acknowledged that city-side costs are going up, and that is one of the reasons that there's been additional state aid. So this is sort of the dilemma that municipalities are facing. In this slide, we try to illustrate one of the challenges that comes with the funding model that we have been using in Greenfield. Because the Unit C contract is so important, we've used that to illustrate the concept, but this is not unique to Unit C. If you look at FY19, you can see the amount that was spent in the operating budget that went towards Unit C salaries. If you look at the FY20 fiscal year, this is an odd year because the Unit C folks have waited so long for retroactive contracts. So we've sort of, it's almost level to last year. It's actually slightly higher because they've gotten a step increase, but it's more or less the amount that was budgeted last year with a little increase. Then the red bar at the top would represent the portion that we're going to vote on tonight, the portion that would come from city contract stabilization in other years, or there might be the funds that the city council voted from special ed stabilization. And that's the gap between where we are today and where we would be, in a week if there were a fully implemented contract this year. And that amount is around $400,000. But the real gap is in next year's budget, because what is already in next year's budget is essentially the same amount as in what's in our operating budget now, but the gap is now 2 years' worth of funding between where it was and where it needs to go. And so the gap next year is closer to, I can't see the numbers from here, I have it on my slide, $750,000. And what this illustrates is not, golly, folks should not have negotiated with Unit C. In fact, the school committee sets the negotiating parameters that folks use to negotiate, and it was clear to everyone that if you lose good people, you aren't doing justice by your students, and that the value of this particular bargaining unit was apparent to everybody. So it has nothing to do with whether this was good negotiating or not, but there's still an issue of one-time funds in the first year, creating a funding cliff in the second year. And that's what you heard when people were commenting on where is the increase budgeted next year? How do you plan for sustainable contractual funding so that employees have the reassurance that that they know what's coming in the years ahead and that they can have a long career in that district? So this slide talks briefly about new positions. And while there's some very important additions here, I will say that it is not especially glamorous. These positions are nearly all requirements from state or federal requirements. Many of them are based on individualized education plans, meaning we have a student known or expected to come who requires this by law, and therefore we have to provide it. Whether we feel that this is the priority or not the priority, it's absolutely essential by law. And so what we have here are primarily special education, a teacher of the deaf, a special education teacher at the middle school and high school, a team chair district-wide, and this is to improve our compliance and our timeliness, and also to support parents who have had concerns about the timeline between when they request an IEP or an evaluation and when that is actually completed. That has been something that has come up in reviews of our district. There's one behaviorist proposed for our entire district, added back in. And the rationale here being that every time we don't have behavioral support, you heard it come up in public comment, when we don't have behavioral support in the classroom, we very often lose those children to more expensive placements elsewhere, and we aren't doing as well by the students as we could, and the other students in the classroom don't get the benefit of being able to focus on their education when a child is dysregulated. So we know that this is a very good use of funds. Out of the many that were requested, we're proposing one, and this is not a highly trained BCBA. This is a behaviorist position. Next is a health teacher at the high school. This is a graduation requirement. Due to a large incoming class, we simply do not have enough teachers to meet the graduation requirements, and so we would need to provide this to help our graduating high school students. And then also included is the Green River Alternative Education Program, which is specifically designed to support our graduation rate, and that includes 3 teachers a coordinator, a teacher, and a paraprofessional. This was previously voted by the school committee a full year ago now, and we have put it in even though it was zeroed out of last year's budget for lack of funding, and we have re-proposed it again this year. Yes?
I just want to ask a question. So can you talk a little bit about how that would affect graduation rate, or why it is that we're interested in that?
Looking to see if our high school principal is here. Do you want to speak to this at all, Principal Patnode?
Ms. Patnode made a wonderful presentation at the budget subcommittee, which supported this rationale completely.
The Green River piece?
Yes.
Graduation rate. One of our concerns over the last few years without having some alternative education programs for our students is that we have students that are unengaged, who are credit behind, and are not fulfilling the requirements in a timely fashion. So we're finding that many more of our students, instead of giving them alternatives to an educational program, they are actually dropping out. So my concern is if we don't become innovative and creative and propose some alternative educational planning for these students, that rate is just going to continue to increase.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, this list is just as long, if not longer. This is what is not included. This is why Member Ekstrom, as the Chair of Budget and Finance, said at the beginning she was not happy with me. The first is a class size reduction teacher at Four Corners School. They are creative and they're making do without, but it does increase the enrollment in a particular classroom if you're not able to add a teacher. A music teacher at Newton School. A remedial reading teacher that was requested at the elementary level for additional literacy. A district-wide BCBA, we talked about this earlier, a BCBA, for those of you that don't love the alphabet soup game we play, is a board-certified behavior analyst, and they're a more highly trained level of behavioral support that can then oversee behaviorists that are working under them. The 3 behaviorists that were requested, such that each school essentially requested at the elementary level to have a full-time behavior support person who would work under an additional BCBA at the district level. An inclusion specialist, also something that came up in public comment. And you'll see that we did something interesting with this. We created essentially a half-time inclusion specialist and half-time team chair, which is included in the budget, but it's not included in the form that it is presented here, which is as a full-time 1.0 inclusion specialist. So instead, we're trying to reduce it down, keep the intent of it. And I think the quote I heard earlier was that inclusion done with understanding and insight makes all the difference, working together as a community and for students in a classroom. We agree there's a real need here, and we'd like to propose working to it in a hybrid way. And then the education team leader, again, it was proposed as a 1.0, and instead what we've done is sort of combine it. And a custodian at Green River School, that is not included in the budget. It would need to be included in the budget when Green River is open, because we would need to maintain that facility. However, it is not yet included while that process is still going out to bid. And we have just held off on it for now, again, looking at that current 11% increase and saying, what could we hold off on until we know, have more certainty. So those are at least 10 positions that principals came forward, said these are high priorities, and were eliminated right off the bat. Principals sitting in the audience tonight feel that these are priorities for their schools, and they did so in consultation with their school councils and working with their instructional leadership team and the teachers in the building. Yeah?
I just want to reiterate, these are not, it says what new needs are not included. They're new needs, and then they haven't been spoken out loud previously. They aren't brand new needs like we found a unicorn in the backyard and want to use it kind of needs. These are things that we were aware that were needed and continue to be needed, but are not currently included.
So these slides, they're a bit busy if you're looking from home. I hope you can see a little bit better. But they show a comparison because people then ask the question, well, are we spending too much? Is that the problem? So the next series of slides, these are all accessible online, publicly available. This is using the Department of Education tool. It's called the DART tool that helps you run this type of analysis very easily. So the first slide, you're looking at Gil-Montague. The yellow line in all of these is Greenfield, and the black line in each graph represents a different district. So you're looking at per pupil expenditures, and you see Greenfield as the yellow line beneath Gil-Montague, showing a peak in 2016 where we sort of caught up to them in terms of per pupil spending, and then dipped back down, and we're well below them. The second graph shows Mahar, where we were essentially even with them, around $15,000 per pupil up until 2016 again, and then dipped significantly below where that district went with their per pupil spending. The gray line in the middle is the state average of per pupil spending, which it shows that we're well below according to the most recent Department of Education spending. The next district is Pioneer, and Pioneer has had both higher and lower per pupil spending over the last several years, but you can see Greenfield as the yellow line below that has always been significantly below it, and again dipping below the state average from 2016 on. Below that is Frontier. Frontier and Greenfield. Greenfield never quite catches up to Frontier in per pupil spending. Although Frontier was a bit level for a while, they have increased significantly from 2017 on. Top line on the next graph is Mohawk. Greenfield is the yellow line below it. And then down below, the last one is looking at Mohawk again, just speaking to teacher salaries. So on this one, teacher salaries for Mohawk are the black line, and teacher salaries for Greenfield are the yellow line. And so when you ask about what is the significant impact of having teachers that know our students, that stay in our district, that commit to our district, I think some of that does have to do with the community conversation and having the ability to reassure staff that when they are here, they're here for the long haul. Next slide, please. So this slide I expect will generate a lot of conversation. This slide talks about the use of revolving funds. And revolving funds are governed by law. They have specific purposes for which you're allowed to take in funds. An example is special education tuition from students who come to Greenfield from another district, where they come to a special education placement in our district. That's one type of revolving fund. And so if you take in funds for that type of purpose, the funds that you take in from that student should go towards the salary for the staff that work with that student, just as an example. So they're not slush funds because they each have very particular rules governing how you can use them and how you cannot use them. This slide shows that we are spending our revolving funds in a way that is very clearly unsustainable. And if you look at the progress over the next several years, it does make some projections. One is that the revenue stays about the same as it is now, and that's the red line. It also shows, makes the projection that we continue using them at the same rate that we are, which is the yellow line. And the yellow line is above the red line. So if you're following with me, what is going to happen when you spend more than you take in is the balance is depleted. And that's the blue line, which is depleted by 2024, unless we do something differently. And it is not very popular to stand here and repeat this, as I have for the last several years, that the model that we've been using is unsustainable here. And it's not that we don't want to kick in our fair share. However, those revolving funds are there for a purpose, and they're there to serve the students that are in front of us. And it's not wise to spend yourself into an emergency. So I want to echo what the chair said at the beginning about the coordinated efforts between the city and the schools and looking at new Chapter 70 funding, and we are exploring all legislative options to really make sure that we are recapturing funds that should be coming to Greenfield. A lot of outreach and advocacy are happening about that, so that our children are not shortchanged. But simply scaling back spending is not always the only answer. It is part of the answer, but when we simply cut special education funding, as an example, sometimes our special education costs increase dramatically because we didn't hire another special ed teacher or because we don't have a behaviorist in the classroom. Well, that student might need to go to a more costly placement somewhere else. And so we are in a position where we've got to make a clear decision. Are we going to invest in our education here in Greenfield? And if so, how do we do that strategically? So I hope that this evening can really catalyze that conversation further. You also heard a lot of conversations about some innovative ways that we are saving money. And I do want to highlight just briefly that transportation has been one such way. In years past, we sat around talking about which bus routes to cut in order to save money and put it into the classroom. And I'm really glad that instead of talking about that this evening, that our transportation coordinator, who's here tonight, Ed Voudrin, our business manager, Steve Nemberko, have worked on how to take an out-of-the-box idea, how to, instead of paying contracts for transportation, how to essentially run our own fleet of vehicles to save money by doing it, and to have that money be money that can then go into our classrooms. So this is one example of a small pilot that has been started that we're going to continue to expand. And somebody asked about, are we branching out? We are working with other districts. There are seats from children in other districts that they can then pick up and pay Greenfield to take a seat on that van ride, and at cost, essentially. And so it's cost savings to the other district, cost savings to Greenfield, and it's a safe option and it's a good option. So that's an example of the kind of out-of-box thinking that we want to continue to do. But it does take startup funding to be able to realize those savings. And I'll leave you with this smiling face. We started with our students. I'd like to end with our students. And obviously, the most of the evening should be about your questions and comments, so I will turn it over from here.
Thank you, Superintendent Harper. I feel like that presentation really reflects not only where we're at, but also what we're trying to do moving forward. And I would open it up at this point to comments and questions from the members. Member Hollins, please.
Clarification, is there no music teacher at Newton?
They made some alternate choices with some of their staffing, so they reduced to part-time this past year.
Member Johnson?
What the question was?
Is there not a music teacher at Newton? And the answer was that they had made some different choices around staffing.
In last year's budget cycle.
Member Ekstrom, please.
I actually want to talk a little bit about the revolving accounts and our spending of those. I want to point out that Member Hollins has actually been very vocal about the dangers of spending down the revolving accounts as long as I've been on the school committee. And this is a person who obviously has some experience with that, having been a superintendent previously right here in Greenfield. And she really has been I want to say a good light, at least for me, to look to, because she has been vocal about it, and Superintendent Harper has echoed what she has said, and it's always a good reminder to have more than one person saying, we're spending too fast. And so I just wanted to speak about that.
And we also do have a policy around the spending of revolving accounts that, as we move forward, we'll take under advisement. Mayor Rita Gardner, please.
I want to just say that I am very proud to have been part of your budget process, and thank you for welcoming me. and allowing me to sit there and hear what you had to say, but also to participate and give you a perspective on the budget for fiscal '21, which is challenging, very extremely, and I want everyone out there to know that this is an extremely challenging budget year for the schools, as you've just witnessed, and for the city of Greenfield. Nobody's going to get what they need, and nobody's going to get everything they need, and nobody's going to get everything they want. And that's just the way it is. And we are all going to work harder to do better next year. Everything from creative ways to bring in revenue, but even maybe more importantly, very creative, very focused effort on finding efficiencies and finding savings, which really at the end of the day translate into better opportunities to use that money in the school, in the instance of the school, on all of our students, and in the instance of the city on providing better services more efficiently to you. I want to address, I just want to acknowledge that I heard Luke's question. I heard them all. I can only address right now one of them, and I can't do that 100%, but I will do my best to try to get you that information, and I've already talked to Amy about it, in a way that you understand. But what I want to address is that when you talk about the city's contribution, and I assume, since you mentioned Chapter 70, that you're talking about the Chapter 70 money, that money isn't kept to do things like buy, a new fire truck or more sand for the DPW. That money is kept, so to speak, and that's not a bad word, not such a good word, but we are contributing, and how we're contributing is it's going to indirect costs, and those indirect costs are ensuring that you have health care, that you have a retirement contribution every year, and many other places, that your vehicles are maintained, and any number, you have workman's comp, whatever. So those are legitimate costs that come, for lack of a better word, out of what the city does. So in order to do that, we have to have some of that money. And that is legitimate under the law, and it is something that we have to do, and it comes back to you in the form of what I just said, your health care, your retirement, and all of those things. If you want justification or numbers, I can get that to you. There are certainly, in some cases, particularly around your health care, privacy issues, so you're not going to get person-for-person amounts, you're going to get a single amount for each category that we know we contribute, so to speak, out of the Chapter 70 funds for all of those things that benefit you. And ultimately, because you're there in the classroom, and we are delighted about that, it allows you to be there with understanding that you will be receiving your retirement and your health care and so forth. So that's the only one I can explain, not in depth, as I just said, but I'll try to get you further information, and I can tell you that certainly Finance Director Gilman is available to answer your questions at any time, and she will take your call as a general rule if she is in the office. And I will, I can't address 2 and 3 at the moment because that's a school committee thing, and I'll have to address it as part of the school committee. Thank you.
Member Hollins, please.
I'd like to make a couple of comments about the presentation, and first thank everyone who spoke, everyone who spoke. On the topic of space, a couple of circumstances have happened in Greenfield that have had an impact on space. First, there was a decision to have a community center, and the administration building, which was in an old school, was raised, and a full floor of the middle school was redesigned to be administrative offices. So we lost a whole floor in that school with the community center. Secondly, we had a program at Green River with over 100 students, a full-day math and science academy, and the building needed heating and some other repairs. And the school committee at that time voted to transfer that program to the middle school. There wasn't a vote to close the program. It was to move the program over while the building was being renovated. I'm pretty sure that was the motion. So we lost a school with 100 students, and then we lost a whole floor. That has something to do with the squeeze on space, just to add that. Secondly, the state changed the, with regard to the Unit C, the instructional assistants, we have over 100, I think, of these folks. The state changed the minimum wage law. Technically, as a city, there was a way you didn't have to follow exactly the minimum wage law, but we're the only city around, and we couldn't get staff, and our rate was really low. So there isn't any other, my understanding, there isn't any other division of the city of Greenfield that has 10-month comparable types of hourly positions that were at this wage level. And it was a couple of years of wrangling on what to do to try and bring that rate up to what the state said it should be. And it was a very low rate. There were people still getting, I'm not sure, like $9, $10, $11 an hour, and the state minimum wage went up to $13, $14, $15 an hour. That wasn't really something the school, like some decision that had really to do with education. It was a state mandate to change wage, and it doesn't seem to me fair that the school department have the full burden of that increase, which was really a lot because there's quite a few people and it's a considerable amount of increase, but it wasn't anything that looked irresponsible. It was a long, and in fact, when we looked at the rates of surrounding districts, one of the reasons we couldn't get staff is everybody was paying $3, $4 more an hour, and that had to happen. So if it was a $300,000 adjustment, we have to figure that out as a city, but it just can't come out of education because it was a citywide issue of a large body of personnel that only existed on the city side, on the school side. I don't think the city has 10-month personnel. So those are two things that are really important to consider in the budget. The third is, I have a little trouble when we talk about how much we spend. This gets to a comment by Shirley Gilfeather, who did such a good job going through the budget. That this district spends this much and we're spending this much and it's less, because my issue with that is that 80% of a school budget, 75 to 80% is salary. The majority of the budget is salary. We don't do much. We're all educators, we're cleaning buildings and teaching children. It's all people. And our salary schedule in Greenfield, pretty much all direct service positions, has been lower than surrounding districts. So I don't think we can necessarily say we're not providing the same services as another district because we're not paying the same amount per children because our salary schedules haven't been the same. So I think Shirley's point that we should look at a same-size district and how they're staffing. Do we have comparable staffing? I think is better. So I want to make those points. I only have received the budget recently. I haven't gone through it, but I did want to look at the page on technology, which is another issue for us. On page 17 is our technology budget. I'm not current on this, but I'm going to guess we have 400 or 500 computers minimum. maybe, I don't know, maybe more, I don't know. We have hundreds of computers. And all of them, and many of them, everything now is computerized, to my knowledge. Nursing services, food services, enrollment, curriculum, testing, everything you can think of has been computerized. And people that have to input this data can't use 7-year-old computers. So there has to be a replacement program because the whole education system in Massachusetts is run on technology. So there's all these software programs that you have to renew every year, and we seem to have a budget for that. So in our budget, on page 17, we have software programs, $200,000. We used to have a list of all of them. You know, it's everything you can think of from health, welfare, everything. So that's in our budget. And when you get down to technology equipment, there's a budget of $14,000. Now we've got hundreds of computers and then firewalls, and we have, unless it's somewhere else in the budget, which is a question, we don't have a replacement program, which
We do not.
Which my understanding should be at least a couple $100,000 a year, and it used to be like that. And the reason it used to be like that is we were allowed with the city, we did have a close working relationship with the city when I was here at least, that ended up with a wonderful new high school. But we used to be able to have capital borrowing between $180,000 and $200,000 a year for replacement of computer equipment, and that ended. So that's another issue for the school department, but I don't see how we can run a school department that has to be completely managed with technology, all of our students, every teacher, every administrator, the business office, how we talk to the city, and to have no technology program. I don't understand all the arguments why we couldn't continue to do capital borrowing at a certain rate every year. One argument, I'm sure there's a good argument, but one argument was that to do capital borrowing, you needed to use the product for 10 years. But in fact, our technology department, to the best of my knowledge, was really good about this. We would bring in the newest computers at the high school, because that's where students are leaving to go into the workforce or into college. They need to know how to use current equipment. And when those were replaced, I think we were doing 2 labs or something, a certain quantity a year, those would go to the middle school, and then the ones in the middle school would go. And eventually they'd get down to kindergarten, but over 10 years, kindergarten children are not doing CAD drawings, they're learning how to type or something, so those older computers were just fine. So our equipment actually was repurposed and used for at least 10 years, and eventually it would die. But that's a concern of mine, that there's $14,000 in the budget, and we no longer have a relationship with the city for approximately $200,000 a year, and that's another important issue, because we have to not only have staff, but we have to have in 2020 technology. And my last...
Superintendent Harper, do you want to respond to the computer?
I just wanted to give you a figure. So in this year, I'm just pulling up the capital request. In this year's capital request, there was between $375,000 and $400,000 in technology, specifically through capital.
Hardware?
Yep. For classroom, computer labs, some of the infrastructure that we depend on, because you're right, absolutely everything is online. If you want to see teachers panic, an internet outage will really do a doozy. So those requests have continued. I'm not really clear what you mean by there isn't a relationship with the city. I think we've talked about that at length.
The chairperson made that there hadn't been a relationship with the city for 10 years, and I thought, really? I don't remember that. I'm
not commenting on that, just clarifying on the capital, and Jean knows quite a lot about this. Sorry, Member Wall, through her work on the capital committee as well. So I'm not getting into the merits of capital or the other departmental needs, which are also quite significant, but we do regularly request technology, and our replacement cycle, when we last did a study of it, was about 17 years, meaning we were keeping technology in the classroom in use for 17 years at a time. The state calls for a 3-year replacement replacement cycle. So you're supposed to replace a third of your technology every year, so that all of it gets replaced every 3 years. The study that we did with 17 years was now at least 3 years old. So I would say we're going on 2 decades of service of most equipment in our classroom, which might qualify for capital borrowing.
I was trying to just add some flavoring to the budget. Because there's some, you can, if you don't have a little bit of background of what's going on, it looks like irresponsible decisions, like, oh, 300,000 for teacher assistants, but the law changed, and we're underpaying people, and the city changed direction on allowing us to get technology, so now that's a couple hundred. I think, we closed out some space, so now we have crowded circumstances, and children don't behave well none of us behave well. If there were another 50 people in this room, we'd all behave differently. So we have to address some of these things. I have one question for the Budget Committee, and that is, what message are we, what message and position are you recommending the school committee take regarding the budget? Here's why I'm asking. The budget that's presented, which has been explained, is based on what we need. A conservative estimate of what we need is about 11%. And most of the districts, maybe they're in different circumstances, from what I can tell, are coming in around 5 or 6%. What I understand from the city is we're not going to get 11%. The city doesn't have it to give us. So what message are we going to, do we want to give the community? Is it, look here, we need 11%, we're going to vote that even though we know we're not going to get it, then we're going to talk about cuts? Or is it going to be, we're going to vote a percent of what we think is possible and then try to find interesting ways to do this? I just want to know, what does the Budget Committee want us to say to the community about what's our position on the budget? We could probably easily increase the budget by 15% and still have needs. That's the way it is. So what do you want us to do?
Jean actually asked me that exact question, and my response was, I don't really know. I just know, like, from my own experience, and Amy, we all, and Jordana, we all discussed this, and Bear as well, and truly, my intention has always been that look, this is what it costs to responsibly educate students in our community, or educate our children. When I think about budgets and contracts, they're negotiations. Everybody comes to the table with the things that they want, need, whatever it is, and you have a discussion back and forth. So I don't know, truthfully. I think that it's for all of us to discuss is what do we think our message is. My intention is that the community know how much it costs to educate our children responsibly so they can go forth in life and prosper.
May I follow up just a comment?
Please.
The reason I'm asking is it's for this reason. If we vote 11% budget, what's going to happen is we're going to learn from the city that there isn't 11% to give us, and then for weeks, the papers are going to be filled, and our school district is going to be filled with, we're cutting this, we're cutting that, and then what we know happens is people start to leave because there's this fear about who's getting cut, and it isn't healthy. That's why I'm asking, are we going to do that again, or are we going to do something else? And one recommendation I have that I think would help the whole budget process, at least as I watch it, I would like to work with the city more on capital expenses, fixing fences, fixing roofs. It just seems like, for one reason or another, our requests for things that have always been capital borrowing don't somehow get into capital borrowing, and they're coming out of our budget. And somehow, if we could have a better working relationship on that, it just really bothers me every time I see that we're blacktopping something and paying $30,000 out of our budget when we don't have enough reading books. That part has to get fixed with the city.
Madam Mayor, please.
Several things I want to address there, but I'll answer that question first. You will be getting fences at Newton School. Mind you, I present a budget to the council, so they can accept my capital budget as presented, or they may desire to change it. I was told at the beginning that I had to cut $143,000 out of borrowing. So I had to make cuts along the way. And believe me, no department got everything they wanted out of it. It's a game of prioritizing. It was the first opportunity I had to look at a budget and try to apply a certain value judgment to each one of them. It is ultimately an expression of their value decisions. And I don't look at just the school's capital, I look at everybody's needs. So it was important to me for us to take care of our property, and this whole budget, capital budget, is focused on safety and security and infrastructure. And so many of the things that were called out within our, I think primarily elementary school, were addressed, and some things were not, because, as I said, I had to cut several hundred, at least over $100,000 out of the capital that was presented to us. Similarly to what you are most likely going, along with my help here, because I do sit here, have to do with this budget. I'm not of the impression that we're voting this budget today. We're just presenting it. As far as the message from the Budget Committee, I'm not on the Budget Committee, so I wasn't part of establishing a message. But what I can say going forward, and I've spoken with Chair Poetti about this, that, and I think it's been brought up in various ways here this evening, the tightness of this budget season. Some of it had to do with literally the election, and the fact that the full new committee did not have an opportunity to see it, obviously, beforehand. But, nor did I. But I can tell you that the normal process should be that, as you mentioned, I think, not the process, but the normal process should be that the city and their finance people and the schools and their finance committee and the school committee, some members of it, should begin that process in late August or early September. Not formulating actual numbers, but looking at where we fell behind in our in the previous year, where we can craft a budget that addresses some of the areas that are needs, and do it in a responsible way. And we each are all talking about the same thing, which is how do we craft a budget at the end of the day that is presented to the council, that is done with the full understanding that we've all had an opportunity to say what we not only say, but focus on what we do need and where we want to take that particular budget for that particular year, next year, to address some of the inadequacies, as well as try to find out new ways to spend money, with hopefully new money.
Thank you. I'm going to recognize Member Johnson on the phone, and then Member Karen, and then Member Ekstrom.
Thank you, Chair Poyetti. And I wanted to thank very much the Budget Committee for working so hard together on this, and for taking a fresh approach which tries to encapsulate the true needs of the students and puts those forward. I think it's actually important that we're confronted and confronting the council and the community with the gap between what is really needed and what we have to work with. I just want to zoom out, as I did at our last meeting, to take a look at some of the structures that are in place that are creating some of these problems, because we're kind of a roll up our sleeves and do the work kind of a group. I think sometimes we can forget about the big picture, which is, the budget calendar that we're on, that is determined by a system that was set up that kind of required the committee to do things more quickly than they might have preferred, and perhaps with less community involvement than they would have preferred. The idea that the funding for our schools is determined in large part by the zip code where we are and the level of poverty that we are in, and that there's an exactly inverse policy from what it should be, where we should be investing more, obviously, in communities with higher levels of poverty, higher levels of need, and less in areas where there's more privilege and established infrastructure. We're confronted this week with, a billionaire who is able to spend $500 million on an election campaign and win one tiny territory with that amount of money. Think what we could have done with our public schools with that amount of money. With even a small tax on the richest among us, we could be paying teachers more, we could be addressing some of these inequities, we could reverse the current system and invest more in communities like ours that have higher needs and really get a great return on our investment, just both from doing the right thing by our students, but also long-term seeing a better effect on our economy and our nation's ability to address the big problems ahead of us, such as climate change and dealing with automation, artificial intelligence, etc. So I guess having said that, I think that kind of goes to a response to Member Hollins' question, which is, for me, I think it's good to put forward to the community a closer picture of what we really need, because I think, as the superintendent said, there are clearly items that were needed that would be, in the minimum that a wealthy nation like ours should provide to every student that aren't even in this budget, but somewhere between what we think we can get and what we know is really needed, and put that forward to the community and to the city council, and let's all struggle with it together. Let's look together at the deficiencies in the system that we're all, to some extent or another, complicit with, because we allow it to go on. And I think we all just need to recommit ourselves to remembering that we're part of what allows the system to go on. That means our students are not getting what they really need and deserve. And we are headed not just for a fiscal cliff, but we could be headed for some really serious problems. We're looking at special needs students not getting their needs met year after year after year, and there could be we could run into some real problems and really feel like a failure to some student or group of students. And I don't know I don't have an answer. Our community, I don't think, can do what Northampton just did and have an override and decide to invest more in the community. I don't know that people are feeling the kind of slack that they would need to do that in Greenfield. But it is important to confront the problem as directly as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Karen, please.
Well, Glenn said it very well. That was great, Glenn. Thank you. I have logistical question, but I really appreciated Shirley Gilfeather's comment about trying to compare us to East Hampton. But where I think the main difference is, and what we need to be really aware of when we do comparisons, is a difference in our high needs students, not just specifically our special education students, because that is really well documented what they need. They have 504s, they have IEPs, they have DCAPs, they have that stuff written down, but high needs students don't always have that written specifically. So it's really difficult to compare us to Frontier or Mohawk because they don't have the same level of high needs students. High needs students can be children with trauma. They can be children of, of poverty level. They can be children of constant transitions, moving home to home. Those don't necessarily have a form or following to get them what they need, but there are people on the ground getting them what they need. So I think it's an important comparison. I'm just not sure that East Hampton's the one we should be looking at for direction, but I don't know. I've never looked at the number of high needs students in their district. And then I just really wanted to talk logistically about this, the notice of budget hearing, and just about the percentage increases. And it doesn't lay out what exactly they are. I'm going with the assumption that a lot of this is increase of wage. I would find it really helpful when we're getting ready to make conversations about where we can take money if I could have this a little more clear. And maybe I'm just not reading it well. Just, if it is all completely human bodies at each building, or where, are we talking about cutting positions? Are we talking about cutting technology? Like, what are we actually talking about? Because I think the point is right. We can't present an 11% increased budget to this town council, I don't think, because I think Susan has some valid points. Clearly it's not going to happen, and we get headlines in the paper, right? And what do people do? They go. It makes me sad that they go, because for me, that's my call to arms, right? My district needs my help, I get in there. I don't run, I get in there, but that's not how everybody responds. And so I think we have to come up with a middle ground, and I think that's where we're headed as a team. So that would help me formulate better conversation in my head, at least.
So for clarification, it sounds like you're looking for something in between the line item and the ad that was in the paper.
Yeah, so like this, this
that
budget.
Cost a lot of money.
I bet it did.
We're talking about money.
Talk about money. More like what the budget report says.
Okay.
Just what we spent in 19 and what we're hoping to spend the next year. More of somewhere in that. This is kind of a little more, this is what we've already expended, this is what's encumbered. I could do some quick math, but
if you want
it'd just be really blankets, quick, easy for me to read. I'm up late with kids.
Thank you. Member Ekstrom, please.
I want to speak a little bit to the word efficiency that we've said a lot. When we're talking about efficiencies, we aren't talking about have someone come over and micromanage what Jordana's doing all day to make sure she's putting this paper in the right spot or anything like that. I'm going to put on my bookkeeper nerd hat for a little bit. For just as a bookkeeper, when I look at a budget and see that there are 2 contract units coming up that hold the majority of the employees for a district, and they both run on the same timeline, that scares me, and that's fairly fiscally irresponsible in my little world. And we have 2 contract units that will be coming up in June, at the end of June this year, that we have, again, 2 contract units running simultaneously. It seems fiscally irresponsible to me. These are if you think about it, so one unit would suffer one year and not get as much because the other unit is getting more. So how about you just separate the running period and talk about it later? And so I think, by the end of this year, we'll have purchased 7 vans, or something along those lines is what we're going towards. So given the lifespan of those vans, in X amount of years, we're gonna have to buy 7 new vans, or can we space it out? And in a couple of years, we replace 2, and then a couple of years later, we replace another 2. I mean, those are the kinds of efficiencies that we're looking at, not do we have too many staff or things like that. I just want to be clear.
Thank you. Member Wall, please.
I think that part of this problem that we have run into is that many of us on the school committee working on the budget don't have background knowledge of the school system and where everybody, we all want the children to have the most wonderful education available on earth. But we need to dive into the nitty-gritty to figure out where we start with. Maybe the preschool children all go to school, but when they get into kindergarten, maybe they don't show up every day. You know, we need to go into depths on a lot of things that affect the school system and not just worry about the dollars and cents. And in that way, we can maybe get the budget more under control by doing a deeper dive into the problems of the schools.
Thank you. Other comments or questions?
I have one more.
Sure, Member Hollins, please.
Last comment. What I hope we won't do this year, whatever we decide the number is or the percent is on budget, is to maybe conceptualize and talk mostly about cutting. Everything that I read in the paper, I was reading the Harvard Business Review today, I was reading Wall Street Journal, I happened to be traveling, so I was reading a lot. But this issue of trying to do the best you can with your money and your business, this is a $21 million enterprise. And if you look around, people adjust things, they do things in new and different ways. There's so many new ways that, anyway, my point is, we lay out what we're doing, we lay out how many students we have, we lay out what the needs are, and we lay out, if we kept doing everything the same way, we need this and we need this. Instead of cutting, I wish we could take that step, which I think is what Jean Wall was talking about. What are different ways that we could provide what we need with the money we have at a qualitative rate that's doing something differently? And I don't think we ever have enough time to just sit down and think, and I think Shirley Gilfeather in her comments where she looked and said, gee, you have this over here, you could do it with this, or whatever, whether it's right or wrong. That level of thinking is what's going on with the economy, with the stock market, with every business, with stores that are going into internet, and we need to be more, at least take the time to have innovative discussion about new and different ways of accomplishing what we need to accomplish with the money we have. School systems are notorious for not being innovative enough. There used to be a joke that it takes 18 years for significant change in education and less than 18 months for significant change in technology. So I think somehow we have to inject that into our budget process, just think tank, how else can we do things, and not only talk about cuts. That's my hope. Thank you.
Thank you. Superintendent Harper, please.
Two things. First, I just want to say that the reason that we're talking about the budget and not the schools is because the school committee has a statutory responsibility to vote a budget, but those of us in administration in the schools have a responsibility to innovate within the classrooms. And I want to caution against sort of legislating by the budget. It's a very important document, and it's a very important decision. But there are many adjustments and changes that take place in our schools every day. So I want to avoid against these broad statements that nobody in education ever innovates. When you think about headlines, that also, is sort of a worn out kind of line of conversation that gets airtime, but it's actually not the fact, because our educators are constantly adjusting to the needs in our classroom. That's why we use formative assessments. That's why we're reviewing our curriculum and why we put in this year's budget a change to our curriculum, as an example. And you may not have mentioned about Greenfield at all. I just want to use this opportunity to say, I think we are doing things in an innovative way. The transportation example is one such example that we talked about tonight that generated real savings. But another way we're doing it is meeting the needs of students, our behavioral health task force, the grants that we bring in, the alternative education proposal that you've heard in front of you. And one thing that the community needs is for the school committee to amplify the innovation that's happening in our schools and to give voice to the way that our educators meet our students' needs, even without the extra positions in the budget. You want to talk about innovation? That's innovation.
Member Wall.
I think that I'm looking at ways to do things like buy computers without using property taxes. I think that we need to go out to the community and say we desperately need a couple of $100,000 worth of computers, and who can help us to gain this. I mean, I think that we can't rely on property taxes for everything, and we have to figure out a way to be more innovative and to not not second guess you on how many behavioral specialists you need, but something like computers are an easy fix. All it takes is money. And so that's what I'm saying we need to look at, is looking at things on that level.
Thank you.
And we do need a vote tonight because of the charter. This is just the memo from the finance director. So we do have to have a vote in order to send it to the mayor for deliberation.
A vote on the bottom line budget prior to all of our discussion?
The mayor will have to make her decision about what goes into the budget book, but without the vote of the school committee, she won't have a budget with which to consider moving into the city budget.
Would anyone like to make a motion? Mayor Wiedegarten.
I don't want to make a motion, no.
A comment, please.
I will make a comment. That may be true. I don't know that you don't have an opportunity to work on the budget further. So, I just want you to know that I question that a little bit. So, I'm not questioning that we may need to vote this, but doesn't mean we can't have discussions about it later, I don't believe.
Discussions and changes.
Yes.
I agree.
And
That is true.
that is the discussion we've had ongoing. That is the plan we've had to move forward, was that this was very clearly a starting point in the spirit of the charter and in making sure we don't get on the bad side of Finance Director Gilman. We will take a vote tonight. And what I have heard in public comment, what I have heard in the very productive discussion from the public hearing here, and what I have heard also in the superintendent's overview in her presentation, is that there are real concerns. This is a lot of money. We need to make sure that we're making smart choices, and we may need to make some hard choices as we move forward, but we're going to do that in good faith with the help of the team that we have up here, and also the team of the budget subcommittee, and of course in communication with the city council and the mayor.
When I say that, I am mindful that there is a bottom line to when I have to submit a full budget to the council, and that is, if you're going to do this, this is going to happen this month at the next school committee meeting, so.
And our next meeting is next Wednesday.
Yeah, okay.
I have a question.
Please.
On the draft proposed summarized expenditure budget, which was published in the paper, the FY 2020 budget, the year we're in, total is $19,301,080. So we're in agreement that 1% is 193,000?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just, if we were going to say, we're going to pass something that's not 11% but 10%, that's 193,000 we're talking about. Okay.
Member Ekstrom, please.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the draft/proposed budget as presented by the superintendent to be shared with the mayor for
I got it.
review.
I'm unsure of what we need to vote on. Can you,
We need to vote on the budget as presented.
as a bottom line, like a bottom line?
Uh,
Or just
As a starting
if we like
point.
this, as a starting point?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, got it.
Do I have a second on the motion?
Would you repeat the motion?
It's been asked to repeat the motion.
You've been asked to repeat the motion.
Yeah, I know, I'm looking at Susan Farber because she typed it out.
I see, right.
She can't remember
You
what she
can't
said.
remember?
No, I was not eloquent.
Approve the draft proposed budget as presented by the superintendent. You shared with the mayor for review.
Thank you. And I believe I had a second from Member Johnson.
Correct.
Any discussion?
Can I add a?
Please.
Could I suggest that it include by the superintendent and budget and finance subcommittee?
Sure.
Friendly amendment to include the Budget and Finance Subcommittee.
Sure.
Where is the, how does it change the motion?
Well, instead of.
Includes the word.
After mayor, you put all
To be
those other
shared with
people.
the mayor and the budget committee, but won't the whole school committee take this up next week?
No, I'm sorry, let me clarify. As proposed by the superintendent and the budget and finance subcommittee
But I
to be
thought-
shared with the
I
mayor.
thought you made it clear that this was the superintendent budget, not the.
Not the
She said
superintendent's
it was
budget.
not. Okay.
The reality is that until the school committee votes a budget, this is not yet the school committee's budget. So I'm acting in good stead and bringing it forward, but this was clearly the vote in the budget and finance subcommittee to budget in this way. And so just to clarify in the motion, that would be helpful.
Susan, do you have what you need? Okay. Any discussion? We'll move to a vote. All those in favor?
To do a roll call.
We need, thank you. A roll call vote, please. Member Ekstrom?
Member Hollins? No. Shoot, I don't know. Can I use your pen?
Yep.
Member Karen?
Yes.
Member Proietti? Chair Proietti?
Yes.
Member Wall?
Yes.
Member Ekstrom, I am a yes. Member Johnson?
Yes.
I can't remember if you vote on this or not.
She votes.
I'm
She
a-
can
I'm
abstain if she wants.
She's a full
Okay,
member.
well, I know
but
that
she-
part, it was, but.
She does vote.
That's not what I was driving at. Mayor Whittegard?
I abstain.
Motion carries.
The motion carries. Thank you. Thank you all for that hard work and insightful comments as well.
May I ask a question? Chair, do you recommend that the Budget and Finance Committee continues meeting regularly to continue this budget process as it evolves?
I do. I think we need to convene a Budget and Finance Subcommittee meeting rather quickly, and we will look to schedule that as soon as possible, but I'd prefer to not take time out of this meeting here to do that. We will do that afterwards. Mayor Wiedegardner, please.
I just want a clarification. Your meeting, which is fine, but eventually the full school committee has an opportunity to take a look at it and also make recommendations for
Correct.
cuts.
Correct.
Because I would prefer that if it's going to come to me.
Correct. We would, yes, we would want the full school committee to have a voice in what moves forward.
Okay.
Will we go over the budget at our regular school committee meeting?
Next week's regular school committee meeting, this will be on the agenda. Yes.
To go over the budget?
In some capacity, the budget will absolutely be on the meeting agenda next week.
And we will have the numbers, excuse me.
Member Wall, please.
We will have the numbers that Member Karen had asked for that are behind the budget.
Yeah, we will work with the finance manager and the superintendent to get exactly what we're looking for in terms of a different picture of the numbers.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I would entertain at this point a motion to close the public hearing on the fiscal year 21 budget.
So moved.
Second.
And a second, there was a motion by Member Ekstrom and a second by Member Hollins. Any discussion of that? We will need a roll call vote for that.
Member Hollins.
Yes.
Member Karen.
Yes.
Mayor Wiedegartner.
Yes.
Chair Poyetty.
Yes.
Member Wall.
Yes.
Member Johnson.
Yes.
And myself, Member Ekstrom. We are unanimous. Closure of the public hearing.
Thank you. And we will now move into item 4 on the agenda, which is funding for the Unit C contract. We have had discussions of the mechanism for this with the business manager and made a determination that we will fund the portion that has not been funded. We will attempt to fund the portion that has not been funded by the City Council, and that the fund that it will come from is school choice money. And I would like to entertain a motion to that request so we can have a discussion.
So moved.
Motion from Member Ekstrom. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Member Wall. Any discussion? Member Hollins, please.
Could you explain, when you say it's coming from school choice, is it coming from the school choice money available for this year?
We're going to have,
could you explain what that means? How much is in the fund?
Yep.
And
we're going to have Steve answer that question for us. Thank you, Steve.
When you say school choice, as you know, there's a balance in there. So the money would come from that balance that's available.
Member Hollins.
When you say balance, there's an amount of money we start the year with, which is a year of school choice funding, and then there's a year's worth of school choice funding we get in during the year.
Mm-hmm.
And in my head, for as long as I've been here, it's been separated by, here's our July 1 balance, this is the money we're working with this year, and here's the money that's coming in during the year that'll form our July 1 balance next year. So could you explain which of those two pots this money's coming from? Is it the July 1 balance we had for 1920, or are we dipping into the revenue that's received during 1920 that normally would be held for next year?
It's over the years, the money that has come in has created a surplus balance in those accounts. So what you're saying is you need 2 years of revenue. There's more than 2 years of revenue in there. So what it would have to come from is that surplus balance. And the surplus balance is about $475,000.
Did you have a further clarification?
I don't understand. What was our school choice on July 1 of this year?
Our beginning balance was $741,000.
And what are we receiving during this year?
And we receive about $560,000.
560,000.
Yes.
And will this is 169,000?
Yes.
Will it be posted, just so I understand it, to the 741 or the 560?
It'll be posted to the 741.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. We got there.
So we're still working with the amount of school choice we had for this year, and we're not
Yes.
dipping into the part that would
Exactly.
normally go.
Yeah.
Great, I'm good.
Mayor Wiedegartner, please.
I may have missed it, but I didn't hear you give an exact number when you asked for the motion.
You are
and the
correct.
motion
As we were
really
talking,
should
I
clear,
realized
should
that.
include that number.
I believe the number, and please correct me if I'm wrong, someone, it's $169,900. Is that correct?
169,099.
099.
Yep.
A friendly amendment to the motion to fix that dollar amount. I'm sorry to confuse the issue. Is the friendly amendment okay?
Yes.
Member Ekstrom, okay?
Could I ask for another
Sure.
consideration for amendment? Could we also say that when we're saying the school choice of the number from the July 1, 2019 school choice funding? Because there's 2 years worth of funding.
Superintendent Harper, I sense you have a comment.
However, did you notice?
Well, Steve clarified
Steve,
where it's
from a
being paid from.
bookkeeping or line item perspective, are these distinct or the same line?
It's all in one line, and we could massage that language to say from the July 1 beginning balance, available balance.
Thank
July
you.
1, 2019, July.
Available balance.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be really helpful.
Okay, so let's make sure that we have the motion worded correctly. I'm already on the bad side of Susan Farber this evening, and I want to make sure I'm on her good side by the end of the night. And let's read the motion. Member Ekstrom, if you would be so kind as to walk me through it. We have a motion on the table to use school choice funds from fiscal year 19 in the amount of $169,099 to fund the school portion of the Unit C contract.
Yes.
Is that correct? Superintendent Harper?
What, can you clarify school portion?
The portion not funded by the city council yet.
Perhaps let's say that.
We have a motion on the table to use school choice funds from fiscal year 19 in the amount of $169,099 to fund the
Unfunded portion.
unfunded portion of the Unit C contract. Do I have that correct? Susan, do you have what you need? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
To use school choice money from fiscal year 19 funds in the amount of 169,099 to fund the unfunded portion of the Unit C contract.
I believe that is correct.
That'll do it? Okay, thanks.
Let's call motion by committee.
We're all on the same page.
Remaining unfunded.
Any further discussion on the motion? Superintendent Harper, please.
I think most members of the committee are very familiar with this topic, having discussed it at length. Even with the changeover in committee, there's still been a lot of public discussion. I want to say categorically that we support our Unit C employees. We thank them for their patience, for these members of our staff that have stayed with us through this process and been there for our students every day. We cannot thank you enough. For members of both Unit A and Unit C that have repeatedly spoken to the committee about the importance of this. Thank you. But I do just want to state clearly for those that may be watching this for the first time, this is a change, perhaps not from all units at all times, but from the way that most school department contracts have been funded for most years. We have relied on a contract stabilization fund from the city for the first year of most contracts. And the reason this one is quite important is because, as Member Holland said earlier, state minimum wage changed dramatically, and this particular contract was negotiated relying upon the city contract negotiation fund in year one. That's how it was negotiated. That's how we approached it. There was communication with the city. There was involvement of the mayor and city. Obviously, we have a different mayor now. And that process was followed in good faith to work with our Unit C employees, recognizing their value to the district. The portion that's already been funded by the city council, we thank the city council for their support, but I want to note it was funded out of special education reserves that are school department reserves held on the city side for special education. And the portion that is being funded now are school department revolving funds that could otherwise be used for the technology that we put in a plea to the city for earlier this evening. The funds we are depleting today are the funds that we could use to do the innovative things that I hear every time this committee meets, they say, how can we do something innovative? And the answer is, with a small margin of reserve, you can do many innovative things. So I just want to note that this is the right step to take because the employees have waited long enough, and I fully encourage the committee to vote in favor of this. And at the same time, we're talking about that tiny little slice in this middle bar that next year, in next year's budget, is much more significant. And we've already begun that process by depleting the reserves, and you remember that blue line going down. With all that said, I hope you'll vote for it because we need these people in our classrooms, and we have got to find a way, working with the city. I'm so grateful that the mayor is committed to working in a collaborative way moving forward, and we've got to find a way to be very clear about what happens with the contract stabilization fund, with how do we approach collaborative problem solving to address the city and the school needs, how to take care of our employees so that this is not our conversation. Instead, we're talking about how to deliver the best education in the classroom.
Thank you. Mayor Rita Gardner, please.
I want to echo Superintendent Harper's praise of the employees under Unit C. I too am grateful for your patience, and I do believe and have believed all along that we should have already done this by now, but it is the process that we're in, and it is being done the way it's being done. I do want to clarify that contract stabilization fund is not there solely for teachers, but the contract stabilization fund is there to assist in funding the first year of all contracts negotiated in the city. So it's there to help the first year funding of your DPW workers and of your clerical help in the town hall and any number of other units, police, fire, etc. So the demands on the previous year's contract stabilization fund from other negotiated contracts, fellow employees of the city of Greenfield, are what contributed to the contract stabilization fund being depleted.
Thank you. Any further discussion, questions, comment? We'll move to a vote.
I have a comment.
Oh, please, Member Johnson, please.
Just to remind the public and maybe to offer a perspective that part of the reason that contract stabilization fund was depleted by the time we needed it is because of an important meeting that needed to happen to transfer funds between accounts. And I think it can be easy to perhaps criticize city council members for not having the quorum that they needed on that day, but there's some indications from my understanding that there needed to be some coordination from the former mayor's office to get that meeting to happen, for there to be adequate notice for city councilors to get there. And I just wanted to appreciate our new mayor for her cooperative approach and an organized manner of working with folks, and feel hopeful that that type of failure to be able to move those funds around at the end of the fiscal year, I feel pretty confident that's unlikely to happen with a steady hand on the ship. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Rita Gardner, please.
Yes. I will say this about that. Thank you, Glenn, for recognizing the new mayor in town, and hopefully what will be a better process going forward. But I would very much like to say I was at that meeting. I do know that there was coordination from the city, and the city was there to explain in detail why that contract why that money needed to be put there. It was for lack of a quorum, real or intended, of the city council, that did not get done.
Thank you for that clarification. Shall we move to a vote?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay, we will need a roll call vote.
Member Hollins?
Yes.
Member Karen?
Abstain for the last time.
Because Member Karen has abstained throughout, so we're all clear. Mayor Rita Gartner?
Yes.
Member Proietti?
Yes.
Member Wall?
Yes.
Member Johnson?
Yes.
And I, Member Ekstrom, am an absolutely yes.
The motion carries.
The motion carries.
Thank you all.
Consideration of another motion on this discussion.
I'm sorry, you, go ahead, please.
I'd like to see if the committee would support a second motion to urge the mayor and city council to replenish the special ed contingency fund and return to the historic process of full first-year funding of new contract negotiations through contract stabilization. I think the reason for this is I think it's this was an unusual and very large settlement. That was part of the issue. But I think the precedent of suddenly not having our first-year contract paid for through city stabilization is not something that should happen again, and I think we should ask the city to go make this an aberration and go back to assuring that prior practice is in place in the future.
Was that a motion? Did I hear a motion?
Yeah, I did
in there?
make a motion.
Did anyone second?
No, not
I feel
you.
like there was okay, I'll second, so that we can discuss.
Motion from Member Hollins and a second from Member Ekstrom. Let's stop and make sure that Ms. Farber has what she needs, please. Can you read the motion again, Member Hollins?
To urge the mayor and city council to replenish the special education contingency and return to the historic process of full first-year funding of new contract negotiations through contract stabilization fund, the contract stabilization fund. I'm not sure the exact name of the special ed fund that was depleted.
Special ed stabilization.
Special ed stabilization fund. I called it contingency, so that's wrong. Special ed stabilization fund. Want me to read it again? To replenish the special ed stabilization fund and return to the historic process of full first-year funding of new contract negotiations through the contract stabilization fund.
I second, but I also have a comment. One being, do we need that, would it be more wise to have that as two motions? And the other comment being that when we were at the city council meeting, Councilor,
Director Gillen. Oh, Wheeler.
Councilor Wheeler indicated that there was an intention to replenish the special ed.
Yeah, I just thought we should be on record saying this is an aberration and we should go back.
Yeah.
Fill in that special ed account we needed and not have this happen again.
Yeah.
Member Karen, please.
I feel like in this whole process, I had always assumed that contracts were always completely funded out of that contract stabilization account, and that hasn't always been the case. It has come down to that occasionally 50% would be funded by the department and 50%, for example. Not that I think that that's how this should have been done, but the wording is more that it's always done that way, and so.
For the schools, it was always that way.
Yeah.
It was.
But we've also never had one quite this
This
large.
was really unusually large. I think that added to the issue.
I just don't.
But
doesn't really matter.
historically, for the schools, because we have 5 unions, the first year, once that was put into place, that's the way it was every year except for this one time.
Mayor Rita Gardner, please.
I would just simply say that I'm going to abstain from this because, and I'm abstaining because I can't assure anybody anything where funding is concerned prior to the fact. Vice Chair Ekstrom brought up a very good point in terms of how we do contracts and and the timelines upon which we do them. We need to be staggering them more so that the impact is not as great, and that's across the city. We do a pretty good job of staggering most of our contracts that we negotiate with other city employees, and but occasionally you get a few back-to-back because of how long it takes to negotiate a contract or so forth. So I will abstain because I'm not going to put us in that position.
It's just
The intent is fine.
Just a request.
The intent is fine.
Any further? Please, Member Johnson.
Yeah, I guess I see it as, well, I see a kind of a perfect storm of things that happened this year with us needing to catch up on years of not having a big increase to the minimum wage, and also the problem that they had with lack of a quorum for that important budget meeting. But there's also a component that does have to do with our work as a school committee and being able to collaborate with the mayor's office, so that we're in negotiations. I mean, obviously it's not going to work for us to put forward a contract increase that's way beyond what the stabilization fund can handle. So there's some element of responsibility, I guess, on both sides. I don't feel a particular need to make a motion on this, but so that's just my comment. I think it has more to do with having a good working relationship between the city and the schools, and less about us needing to make some kind of statement to the city.
I thank you for your comment, Member Johnson, and I think you said it more eloquently than I could. It's not a method of moving forward that I necessarily feel comfortable with. I think we need to establish a communication with the various pieces of the city that would, and the school department that would move these negotiations forward and the funding forward in the future so that it doesn't happen again. But I don't see this as a mechanism to do that. Superintendent Harper, please.
At a recent city council meeting, I heard Director Gilman reference some of the same concerns that we talked about tonight with the practice of one-time funds. So I agree with this, the motion as an intent, sort of statement of will of this body, that the special education stabilization account should be used for special education stabilization. In fact, this year, working with our interim director right now, it's very clear that we have students with a greater need than can be served in our schools as presently staffed, and those students are very costly, and there have been some already that are unexpected. So that's the purpose of the special ed stabilization account, and it's important to the vitality of our community that we have that. But I will say that whether the contract stabilization method is continued or not is a really good subject of study. And on the topic of collaborating with the city and the schools, one good possibility would be having a working group to actually explore, is this practice recommended through Mass Municipal Association or other sort of municipal organizations? Is there a different way to approach this that would be more advantageous for the city and help the schools funding? And to enter into an MOU with the outcome of that process, whether that's continuing to use the contract stabilization fund or simply when a new contract is ratified, having that be part of the operating budget of the DPW, of the fire department, of the schools, such that you simply don't have the same kind of fiscal cliff the next year. Whatever the practice is, I think what's most important is that we all know at the beginning that the rules don't change midway through negotiating any bargaining unit. It's simply not fair to the employees, and that it's that way very clear for the city's budgeting purposes and for the school department, and that's an exercise in good prudence and financial planning. So anything that moves us toward that shared communication, I would fully support.
Thank you. Further discussion, questions, comments? Okay, so we will move to a vote, and we'll need a roll call. Does anyone want the motion repeated?
Yes, please.
Susan, would you be so kind? Thank you.
to urge the mayor and city council to replenish the Special Education Stabilization Fund and return to the historic process of full first-year funding of new contract negotiations through the Contract Stabilization Fund.
Thank you. And we'll need a roll call vote.
Member Hollins?
Yes.
Member Karen?
Can you come back to me for a second? Thank you.
Mayor Weidergartner?
Abstain.
Member Proietti?
No.
Member Wall?
No.
Member Johnson?
No.
And Member Ekstrom, I'm also going to say no because I think it's two separate motions.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, I had to come
That's
back to you.
okay.
My
I had
mistake.
to think longer.
Okay.
Do the first half?
The motion does not carry.
Can I try the first half again for you?
Do we have another motion on the table?
Could I
Please.
try just to urge the mayor and city council to replenish the special ed stabilization fund?
Second.
The motion is to urge the mayor and the city council to replenish the Special Education Stabilization Fund. There was by Member Hollins with a second from Member Ekstrom. Discussion, please. Mayor Weidergartner.
That goes without saying, it needed motion.
Is that it? Okay.
Any other questions, comment, discussion? We'll move to a vote.
Member Hollins?
Yes.
Member Karen?
Yes.
Mayor Weidergartner?
I guess it's a yes. I thought I just said so.
You said abstain, but I wanted to.
I know, it's official now.
Member Proietti?
Yes.
Member Wall?
Yes.
Member Johnson?
Yes.
And myself, yes. That is a unanimous.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Good work. Okay.
Is there a second half of that motion you're going to try again or no?
Well, I liked I personally feel it's important to say something because I don't think what we're doing should continue, but I like the way it was rephrased, maybe to work to get, I like the way the superintendent reworded it, to work with the city on the study of the historic process of first-year contract negotiation through the Contract Stabilization Fund. I just think we shouldn't drop it. That's yes, that would be my new motion.
Second. Member Karen got it.
Okay, so let's actually put a motion together here that we can have.
Don't drop it.
Susan Farber can actually write down. So the motion is to work as a school committee with the mayor to study.
City council.
And the city council to study the historical process of
First-year funding through the Contract Stabilization Fund.
first-year funding through the Contract Stabilization Fund. Thank you. Susan, you got it? Okay.
Or alternate funding methods.
Oh, here we go. Or alternate funding methods? Is that acceptable?
Yeah, I just think we have to say something.
Because we're studying it, that would be a friendly amendment you'd be okay with. Okay.
Superintendent's point is well taken. We can't get in the middle of this and then find out it's something different and.
Okay, and did we have we had a motion, do we have a second? A second from Member Karen. And the discussion is, it's something we have to study, move forward. Any further discussion on that? Let's move to a vote.
Member Hollins?
Yes.
Member Karen?
Yes.
Mayor Weidergartner?
Yes.
You got Member Proietti?
Yes.
Member Wall?
Yes.
Member Johnson?
Yes.
And that passes unanimously.
Hooray. Can we take a 5 minute?
Member Ekstrom also says yes.
We love you.
Somebody wants to get out
Always
of
in the
here.
middle.
So, someone is asking for a 5-minute break. Is that acceptable?
Do we need it? Can we just do this
We
thing?
got one thing left.
We got one thing left.
Oh, well, everybody's about to leave. Okay.
Okay.
If you can do it in a minute or less.
Okay.
Done.
The final item on the agenda, vote to cap enrollment at virtual school at 1%, and I would ask the superintendent to introduce the topic for us, please.
Okay, in your packet, you have guidance from the Department of Education stating that the committee must take a vote if they wish to exercise their right to cap the enrollment of a virtual school when it exceeds 1%. And Greenfield's enrollment in the virtual school, which was started here in Greenfield and exists here in Greenfield, is just slightly above 1%. And it's not an extraordinarily high number. But if the school committee votes to cap it, then those, that would go into effect. If it takes no action, then the enrollment can continue unimpeded.
And what is your thought process?
I suggest that you vote to cap it so that those students can take advantage of the education that's available and the guidelines that are set forth.
Okay, so I would need a motion for starters. Would someone like to make a motion? Member
Hollins, go for it.
No,
She doesn't, she wants to comment.
Member Wall, I haven't heard you make a motion yet.
I'll make a motion.
Member Johnson, please.
I move to cap the enrollment at the, can you help me out here?
At the Commonwealth Virtual School?
Commonwealth Virtual School at 1%.
Second.
Did I get that right?
For Greenfield.
For Greenfield.
Greenfield Commonwealth Virtual
Oh,
School.
at the Greenfield Commonwealth Virtual School at 1%.
Did you get that, Susan?
I accept the friendly amendment.
Second.
And a second from Member Ekstrom, and a comment from Member Hollins.
I want to say I think this is a terrible idea, and I'll explain why. We have about 1,750 students, and we have 20 parents, so we're over by about 2 parents.
Yep.
The reason we have public education is actually compulsory attendance, the responsibility of parents to educate their children and to choose where they go. That's what our state is. Why in the world? We get about $7,500 in state aid for each student, and this costs $8,250, so our real cost is about $1,200. And why in the world would we have 2 or 3 parents that want to go that we say no to? One of the first students that went to this school had cancer, couldn't enter the school. And if somebody really wants to go to the school and needs it, why would we tell a parent no? And we're talking about 2 or 3 parents. Why would we do that? I think it's a wrong idea.
Member Karen.
If we vote in a 1% cap, but we're over 1%, those people are still stay enrolled, correct? It says, from the district exceeds 1% of the annual total enrollment in district, provided, however, that no student enrolled can be compelled to withdraw because of that vote.
Correct.
Okay.
I was just trying to find the language.
Yes.
Mayor Wiedegardner.
Applies to future enrollment.
Right, so from now on, we couldn't get more enrollment, just can't kick out those who are in there.
Mayor Wiedegardner, please.
I guess my question is there an ultimate cap? I know that we can cap it according to what I have read briefly here. I know that we could cap it at 1%, but is there a cap at the state level at all on virtual schools? Like, it can never go more than 3% or 4%. Did I miss it?
I don't know.
It's 2% for the state is 2%.
Okay, good. I did miss it then. Totally missed it. Thank you.
Member Hollins.
Big black
I just wanna
headline.
know,
Why
wow.
would we want to do that for 1 or 2 parents out of the whole city who want to go? Why is it so important? With the reimbursement from the state, it costs us so little for a parent to go.
Member Wall.
I think that we allow students to go to charter schools. We allow them to, we have special needs students that do what they need to do. I see no reason to forbid parents from going to the virtual school.
So can I just comment briefly? I really asked for a 5-minute recess so we could have a more thorough conversation. But I will ask Steve to just comment. So in other words, we talk a lot about school choice out, and this committee has often asked about ways that we can encourage families to stay. This is one avenue that we have. It's very simple. It's simply a vote of the committee. Other districts have taken advantage of this option, and all we're doing is capping 1% of our enrollment here, attending attending another school that's essentially a different district that is in our city that is competing for the same students. And Susan Hollins may actually have a different perspective having started that school. It may actually be a conflict of interest for you. I'm not sure at all. I'm not suggesting that it is.
Parents should be able to.
Wait, if I could just finish.
Let the superintendent finish.
It's a conflict of interest.
No, I'm not saying that it is. I'm simply saying you may have a different perspective because the Greenfield Commonwealth Virtual School used to be part of our district and isn't any longer. But the way it operates now is a valuable service, but as a distinct school district. So that's for the committee to decide. My recommendation would be that because we're working hard to provide innovative services in district, because we're working on technology in district, because we think that we can provide a good solution for Greenfield students, that I would love to see this committee advocating for our Greenfield residents to enroll in their Greenfield schools, which can meet their needs. And I think we can do that by saying up to 1% is recommended by the state with a Commonwealth virtual school like this. And so I think we take that recommendation. This isn't my recommendation. It's a opportunity available to you through the state, and that's for you all to vote this evening. And I don't think there's any significant impact. Like I said, it won't take anybody who's already enrolled there away. We're not taking away a choice from anybody who's there. We're simply expressing support for our neighborhood enrollment.
Member Karen, please.
I'm trying to understand what you were saying, Susan. You keep saying 1 or 2 parents, but if we allow this cap to go to 2%, that will double our number. We could have 40 people involved in the school. So I'm trying to understand why you're saying 1 or 2 parents.
Well, right now, we're over by 2 parents.
Right, but they can't be removed from the program.
They can't be removed.
Okay.
But suppose somebody else comes along that's got kidney failure or brain cancer or something, and they went to school. But why are we passing something when it's so few parents and the law allows them to choose? If we got to the point that there's 100 children going, I just don't understand why this is so important for just a couple of people who decide they want to go to that school when we're reimbursed for almost all of it.
Well, sorry.
Please.
I guess my point is that we're not talking about, it could not become a couple of people. It could become 20 extra people, which times
Could, but that's not the
$1,000, an
situation
extra
we're in.
$22,000, and that's at least 1 para in our district. That's just where my brain is going.
Mayor Rita Gardner, please.
We don't know how long it took for them to get to 20 students, so I think you can take a risk to a certain extent that it's not going to happen tomorrow if we vote no on this, or either way, really. But I think I'm inclined to agree with Member Wall and Member Hollins, so.
Other comments, questions, discussion?
I don't know if Steve was.
Oh, I'm sorry. Member Johnson, please, and then
Funding
Steve.
for that.
How it's funded, the funding
Yeah,
mechanism?
I think that I just come at this from the belief that our schools are great, that the public school system, the system of students going to schools in the communities where they live, where we have excellent teachers, where we are investing resources, makes sense, and I really think that we need to advocate for our schools, retain our students, retain our investment, retain our belief in the public school system that we have. And I do think it's important for folks to know that that Member Hollins, who's speaking for this, not only participated in the creation of this school, but also was involved in as a contractor with the Warwick Public Schools and looking at setting up another charter schools that could have, if it had been approved, attracted more students from Greenfield, and also was part of the design of it was to lean on the virtual school for some of its offerings to reduce costs. So I just think it's important for the public to know when they're hearing the advocacy for not keeping this 1% cap, that there are some interests at stake at the table from members of the school committee, and those interests were not, they may not have been a technical violation of a conflict of interest law, but I do think it is in the public interest to know the background there.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Steve to speak to Superintendent Harper's question, and then I saw Member Wall, and then Mayor Wiedegartner, and then Member Hollins after that. Please, Steve.
Sure, I'll just give you the quick version on charter school funding. So whenever a student leaves our district to go to a charter school, we're assessed a value for that student. Unlike choice, where there's a $5,000 revenue for that, the cost for a charter student is much, much more. It's closer to the average per pupil cost, which is, say, $12,000, $13,000. So, you know, and you're right, if two leave, that's $26,000 right there. Right now, Four Rivers is the largest outsourcing of our students, and then the virtual school is second. It costs us, the city, $1.3 million per year for charter school costs.
Thank you. Member Wall, please.
I just think that we have a responsibility to the parents and the students of Greenfield that if we can't provide for them the schooling that they need, that they should have the option to choose another place. I mean, I don't have anything to do with that all seems to me to be a fruitless discussion.
Mayor Wiedegartner, please.
I would like to say that actually voting, to insinuate that voting no on this somehow is a statement that we don't believe in Greenfield Public Schools is completely erroneous.
Yes.
And I think it was inappropriate, but we do have an opportunity as Americans to say what we want to say. But I just want to be very clear that that is not the case, and I'm very mindful of what, because I see it in warrants and everything else, what the amounts are that are going out to charter schools. But I have no stake in it. But I'm inclined to agree with the overall argument that there are certain times when a virtual school is the absolutely correct choice of a parent. And I think Member Wall makes a very good comparison when she says we have people go to the charter school. Maybe once upon a time when Four Rivers was just getting up and running, we had these discussions similarly. But we don't anymore. We have special needs students that go out of district, and we do the best we can with the money that we have to spend, with the lack of the money that is sent out. So I remain committed to the vote that I'm going to take.
Superintendent, oh, I'm sorry, Member Hollins was next, and then Superintendent Harper.
The tuition to the virtual school is $8,250. The amount of state aid we get on average per student is close to $7,500. It isn't the same as a charter school. It has a different funding rate. The entire Greenfield School Committee voted to open that school. I have nothing to do with it. I think Member Johnson's comments are really inappropriate. The compulsory attendance law in this state is that parents must educate their children. The compulsory attendance law isn't that everybody has to go to a government school. Parents can choose to educate their children at home, send them to a private school, or send them to a government school. This state believes in school choice. My point is only that we're over 1% by just a couple of parents. Why would we want to take an action just for a couple of parents who thought this was the appropriate place for their child? That's what the law says. The parent has to make sure their children are educated. I don't know why we want to be on the front page for a couple of parents. The reason we started the school was actually after a couple people committed suicide because they were so bullied in their school, according to the papers, that they had no option. That was one of the reasons we started the school, that nobody should feel trapped if they need to get out. I don't care where a parent sends their child to school. I'd love to have great public schools, but I think telling a parent that they have to go here and not go there, if they don't want to go here, they're going to choice out anyway. Why do we want to do that? for two parents where we're over 1%. Just doesn't make sense to me.
Member Karen.
I think the last line you made makes your point more than anything else you said, and so I'm just going to repeat it back to you, even if I don't necessarily agree. And what you said was, if they going to choose a virtual school, they're going to choose a different school anyway. I think that that's the point you're trying to make. Has been a little lost in that conversation, in that you believe that if they don't have the virtual school, they're not going to choose to go to Greenfield Public Schools. They're going to choose somewhere else anyway.
I think you should be able to choose where your children go to school. That's my point. I don't think we should be deciding it for people.
Other comments, questions? Does anyone need the motion reread?
Yes.
I've forgotten at this point.
Ms. Farber,
You might have
would
to
you be
move,
so
Steve.
kind
I'm in the way, like usual.
The motion is to cap the enrollment at the GCVS, which stands for
Greenfield Commonwealth Virtual School.
Commonwealth Virtual Charter School, at 1%.
Thank you. We'll move to a vote. And we'll need a roll call.
Member Hollins?
No.
Member Karen?
No.
Mayor Wiedegartner?
No.
Member Poyetti?
Yes.
Member Wall?
No.
Member Johnson?
Yes.
Member Ekstrom.
Member Ekstrom? I'm going to say no.
The motion does not carry, is that correct? Yes.
So by default, that means the cap would be at 2%. Yes?
It's statewide.
Right.
So it could go to anything in Greenfield. It's just a
It can
statewide,
come back up another year.
there's no cap.
Okay.
There's no cap.
But that doesn't mean this discussion is closed. I mean,
Does not. That
It
would mean
just
a
means
discussion is
today,
closed.
we chose
That's-
not to.
okay.
Correct. And that is the last item on the agenda for the evening. Do I have a
I moved to
a
close.
motion to adjourn from Member Wall and a second?
Hey, second.
And a roll call vote, please.
Member Hollins?
Yes.
Member Karen?
Yes.
Mayor Wiedegartner?
Yes.
Chair Poyetti?
Yes.
Member Wall?
Yes.
Member Johnson?
Thank you all for accommodating me with all these roll calls.
I believe that's a yes. And
Thanks-
Vice Chair
thanks for your
Ekstrom
political
also says
commentary.
yes. We are adjourned.
And we are adjourned at 8:50 p.m. Thank you all.
I like actually slide it.